Hello, guys. David Vos here. What a beautiful day. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. It's been a little hot, though. And beautiful blue skies. Hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. Well, friends, today I want to talk about the Empire State Building. I want to talk about the Astoria Waldorf building. I want to talk about Tesla. I want to talk about the Federal Reserve, how it was made. I want to talk about the Titanic and the Olympic that were switched. I want to talk about John D. Rockefeller and DuPont, JP Morgan. Um, well, we got a lot of things that we want to go over today. So put your thinking cap on, get you, I guess if it's evening, you might get a glass of wine. I'm still drinking coffee, and I usually drink coffee until I end up going to bed. But anyway, get you something to drink and get comfortable. We're going to talk about some amazing things. It's going to really kind of put a lot of things in perspective. I think this video is going to be chock full of really interesting information. So here we go. Now, the story of this Empire State Building is really interesting, and very few people really know the story or why there should be a story, or why they should know it. But it has to do with the world empire. It's called the Empire State Building. Well, before this building was built there, the land was owned by Astor. Astor is the guy that killed on the Titanic. He was the richest man in the world. And he owned that area, and he built a hotel, the Astoria. And right next to it, Waldorf built another hotel. And then it got joined into the Waldorf Astoria building. And then it was eventually, when they killed Astor on the Titanic, then DuPont, a huge big name financed by JP Morgan and the Rockefeller, they took over. Now, I don't know of any historian that has mentioned this. I've said it several times. This was a sign that the world had been taken over, just as the Titanic was a sign, because the Titanic means the Titans, and the Titans went into the abyss. And Zeus took over the reins of power. So when Zeus took over, he punished his rivals by sending them into Tartarus, or the abyss, or the ocean. He sunk them in the sea, and this probably has something to do with the flood, right? And so some individuals who ruled before the flood then no longer rule after the flood, shall we say. Well, so that was the age that then was, and now we're in the age that is now being reserved for fire. Well, the people who owned the world up until the Great World War, the First World War, was Astor and some other individuals that were billionaires. I don't know if they're Bavarian. I think I looked into that once, but I don't know his. At the moment, I guess I haven't done enough research to find out exactly his family line. But it is interesting that Astor is the same word as Esther, only the male version of that. And that's the star, or Astarte, or Ashtaroth, or something. It's also probably Osiris in the Egyptian, right? The Grand King, Caesar. There was an original Caesar, Julius, then Augustus, who usurped his power and destroyed and killed him and claimed to be his adopted son and took over. And by the way, Augustus Caesar today, if you take the money that he had, that he stole, and converted it into modern money, he would be the richest. He would be far richer than Elon Musk. I think 2 or 3 times richer. Augustus Caesar stole that wealth from Cleopatra and Julius Caesar and all of the generals when they went in and destroyed them. Julius Caesar didn't do that. Now, he would probably be worth about $20 billion today. But Julius Caesar had a confederacy with Cleopatra, and they had a lot of wealth. But Julius Caesar was actually trying to give his wealth away. He was giving it to the peasants, and they were making libraries and roads, and schools. Well, the Senate didn't like that, and when Julius Caesar would come back from his campaigns, his warring with various barbarians up in the north. So that's where we get this phrase campaign. Like, what do they call it? A campaign, like when they're running for president. It's a campaign. Well, originally a campaign was Julius Caesar's war efforts to take out the enemy. And when he would come home with all the booty and make the libraries and the roads and help the Roman people, they loved him. And they wanted to make him king, right? That was his campaign. So that's why these individuals are running around trying to make all these promises and doing, jumping through hoops, trying to make you love them. They want to be like Julius Caesar, but they can't. They're just wannabes. But Julius Caesar, he called them barbarians, these Vikings, to protect his schools and roads. And once he would take a certain area, he would tax them in order to protect them. And it was protecting them from the bad guys, which was these Goths. Eventually, by 400, the Goths took over Rome. But Julius Caesar tried to give the money back and give it to the people. When he'd come back on his campaigns, he'd have all this loot, the booty, right, from winning these wars. And the Senate would divide it up amongst themselves. And this is why they killed Julius Caesar, because he was trying to make the world a better place and give the money to the people. Anywho, the point is that it's very, very important to see that the Titanic never sunk. It was a different boat, and we'll share with you what boat it was. It was almost identical to the Titanic. No one knew that switcheroonie had taken place. And this particular boat was already damaged, and they had this all planned. And they made sure that Astor was on it because it was a world takeover. And so once they took over that empire, they built the Empire State Building. And this was done by the DuPonts, who used some individual architects. And you look it up and they'll say some other person built it, but it was all financed and planned by the DuPonts, who got his financing from the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan. And so they kind of, as a body, they own the world now. And to show that they own the world, they had the Empire State Building. What I also think is very, very interesting is that Donald J. Trump purchased the Empire State Building for a short while, and then he ended up selling it, making a profit on it. But I do believe that was a sign either that he was now the empire chief, or there was a struggle like there was in the past, and they had to kill Astor because he wasn't going along with the plan. Donald Trump does seem to be going along with the plan, but he did not gain control. Now there's a sort of a board of like a company, a corporation, a real estate corporation that owns it now. No one person owns it after Trump. So, once Trump sold it, made a profit, he could say, I did own it. I am the world chief empire, the emperor, right? I am the man who, in the latter days, just before the world ends, the last president, I own the world, right? And now there's a struggle for this real estate or the world. So Trump just went ahead and built right down the street on Fifth Avenue his castle. And to share another little point with you to show my point, before or after Astor, and certain rich people came along. One of them was Rockefeller. He took the place. He was the ruler. He was the big guy. And I'll tell you more about how Rockefeller and his J.P. Morgan guys and they got together on Jekyll Island and made the Federal Reserve. That's a story you need to stay tuned for. But Rockefeller took over, and so Rockefeller made the Rockefeller Plaza and was instrumental in creating the United Nations, which is across the street. So going to the United Nations were all the countries of the world, and they would go to the plaza of Rockefeller. Rockefeller also owned a building near Fifth Avenue. So everything that Rockefeller had done in owning this real estate and becoming and was, being the man, he had some interest in the Empire State Building. But now Trump comes along and builds Trump Plaza just to mimic Rockefeller, because Rockefeller's gone and the man now is Donald J. Trump. He's got the Trump Plaza and the Fifth Avenue Tower and, for a short while, control of the Empire State Building. The fact that he doesn't own it now either is that he didn't want it because he wanted to make money. I don't think so. I think it's a status symbol. I think Trump wanted that building, but he wasn't really, it was a battle to get the building, and he, for a short while, had it. Somehow it fell through or whatever, or he ended up selling it, making a profit, being forced to sell it. And I guess the battle is still ongoing as to who will own the building. So, what's interesting is that Tesla lived in the Astoria Waldorf building for about 19, 20 years. He was good friends with the Astoria family. Well, now, good friends with the Astorias, the richest people in the world? Well, now mind you, he lived in the Waldorf Astoria building before World War I, because he was really good friends with the Astor family. Now, as you saw just earlier, the Astor family all died. Now you probably might see why Tesla was not well liked. There were two competing families. The Astors, they were very wealthy, and they were not for the Federal Reserve. They were not for the Rockefellers and the DuPonts. And they had the authority, and they had the land, and they had the big Empire building. It wasn't called that yet. It was called the Astoria Waldorf. And so Tesla was their guy, and had they not killed John Astor on the Titanic, which wasn't the Titanic, as we said, then he probably would have never built the Empire State Building. It would have continued. The Astor Building would have probably rebuilt it, in his own image, and he would have been the world empire holder, the chief, and Tesla would have used his inventions for free energy, and the world would have been a different place. But because Astor died, I assume because he didn't agree with them, or maybe they were both equally evil and everything. But the one thing we do know about Tesla is he called it free energy. He wasn't interested in selling it, and he never got a good deal after the Astors died, because now they needed his inventions. They couldn't get him until after he died. Now it's interesting that John Trump, Donald Trump's brother's son, his uncle, I should say, Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, got the Tesla papers. He was high up in the government. So I don't think that the German people that came over to America and fully took us over until after World War II. And that's when Tesla was gone, and they took his papers, and they started, when they got his papers, boom, now they got these flying machines and flying discs, and now we've got internet all over the place with the bad guys in charge, because they took the giants, the powerful ones, the Nephilim, and sunk them in the Titanic. But it wasn't the Titanic, because you see, had it been the Titanic, the Titans, they should have gone into the sea and been punished. But it was the other way around. They did a switcheroony. They said, you're not going to throw us in the abyss. We're going to kill you before you kill us. And so it was a war. Now, is it possible that Donald J. Trump is affiliated with the Astors as well, and is opposed to the group that's running the world today? And there's still a feud, and somehow or another his dad had a little money, and he's got enough power to challenge these guys and buy the Empire State Building, and this is the battle that's going on right now? No, I think that it is possible that Tesla was trying to do good things, and that's why they didn't like him. Astoria or Astor may have been trying. They killed them. They couldn't kill Tesla because they needed his information. And maybe Trump's a bad guy because he's also from Germany, Drumpf. And he sent his, or his dad sent his brother's son in there and got the papers. And now him and Elon are mad scientists. And they're going to destroy the world. I don't know. Warp speed, if you know what I mean. There could be some rivalries going on. It may be two devils trying to take over, or maybe they've joined forces now and they're ready to take over the world. But if you look this up on the Goggle Brothers about whether it was the Titanic or the Olympic, it claims that the Titanic was secretly switched with its sister ship. And they always say it's false. The craziest Titanic conspiracy theories explain. The wild conspiracy theory that the Titanic never sunk. Corrected fact check, J.P. Morgan did not sink the Titanic. He didn't, huh? Okay, well, I believe you because you're always fact checking this so accurately. Did the Titanic really sink or was it Olympic? Well, I wonder why you're asking the question. Who even told you to ask the question? You know, it's on. So I clicked on this Wikipedia, and this is their official story. On April 14th, 1912, this is before World War I, before the creation of the Federal Reserve, which is now the means by which they've taken over the world. The Titanic collided with an iceberg. Yeah, right. Damaging the hull's plates below the waterline on the starboard side, causing the front compartments to flood. The ship then sank 2 hours and 40 minutes later. Do you know how hard it would be to sink the Titanic? They said it was unsinkable. What were they doing up there in the ice? I mean, it's ridiculous. The ship, and what was the most powerful, richest man in the world doing on this ship? And his brother Strauss. Levi and Strauss, you know. It says that since many conspiracy theories have been suggested regarding the disaster, these theories have been refuted by subject matter experts. Captain L.M. Collins, a former member of the ice piloted service, based a conclusion on 3 pieces of evidence and going off of his own experience of ice navigation and witness statements given to the 2 post-disaster inquirers that what the Titanic hit was not an iceberg, but low-lying pack ice. Okay, well, a lot of speculation. One of the controversial and elaborate theories surrounding the sinking of the Titanic was advanced by Robert Gardner in his book Titanic, the Ship That Never Sank. Gardner draws on several events and coincidences that occurred in the months, days, and hours leading up to the sinking of the Titanic, and concludes that the ship that sank was in fact Titanic's sister ship, Olympic, disguised as Titanic, as an insurance scam by its owners, the International Mercantile Marine Group, controlled by American financier J.P. Morgan, that had acquired the White Star Line in 1902. Researchers Bruce Beveridge and Steve Hall took issue with many of Gardner's claims in their book Olympic and Titanic, The Truth Behind the Conspiracy. Author Mark Chirnside has also raised serious questions about the switch theory. British historian Gareth Russell, for his part, calls the theory so painfully ridiculous that one can only lament the thousands of trees which lost their lives to provide the paper on which it was articulated. Deliberately sunk? Some conspiracy theories believe that the Titanic was sunk on purpose to eliminate opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank. Actually, both of these things that are conspiracy theories are actually true. And it doesn't even take a genius to look at the situation and realize it's true. Astor was against the Federal Reserve. He wasn't playing with their little games, and they had to get rid of him because he was a very powerful man. There is a war going on, and the Titans shall fall. So it says some of the wealthiest men in the world were aboard the Titanic for her maiden voyage, several of whom, including John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Strass, were allegedly opposed to the creation of the United States Central Bank. Looks like Astor had his empire in the United States, and the others might have been German type peoples. Well, the Germans win, right? After a long battle. So let me show you a little bit more information about this sinking of the Titanic. It's hard to find this theory anymore. The Goggle brothers have made it so confusing that stuff that they don't want you to know, the only way you'll find anything about it is from a fact checker saying it's false and they're poo-pooing it and so forth. But here I found this little short, because I wanted just to give you the story in a short form. But it says, while the Titanic was still dry docked and under construction, its sister ship, the Olympic, was sailing from Southampton. Now, what I find to be absolutely insane is that, as I just got through saying, the Titanic means the Titans, and it was sunk in the sea, and the Titans were thrown into the abyss or the sea. But who threw the Titans into the abyss? The Olympians. Yeah, Mount Olympic and the Olympians. Zeus, and his brothers and so forth. So the Olympians are the 12 deities that, well, in the end, I guess there's 6 of them that ruled the day with Zeus, and the other 6 were thrown into the bottomless pit. So that's it. Well, you hear about the 12 Olympians. So there was 12 at the top and 12 at the bottom. There's night and there's day. There's 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night. So yeah, there was 12, but it's half and half is the way this goes, day and night. Because the wheel of rebirth, the circle, the darkness is on the bottom, the light is on the top, day and night, winter and summer. And every year, the top side goes to the bottom side, becomes winter. So this is an ancient story, but the story is told in the Bible as a factual story, showing us that these other mythologies and so forth were using a real story to teach some moral lessons, and at the same time preserving the legend or the truth or the history involved in the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4, and they fell and so forth. Well, the Olympians then would get the victory. In this case, they told the world that the Titans fell and the Olympic didn't sink. So that would be victory for the Olympians, right? The good side. But secretly, they sunk the Olympians. It's like they're saying, look, we're going to kill Jesus in this new age. Jesus is coming and we're going to win and Jesus is going to lose. And it's out of place. It's even the parable itself is a switcher. It isn't the way it was supposed to happen. They were supposed to use the Titanic, but instead they used the Olympic. But it says, during the voyage, the Olympic became damaged on the rear starboard side. It was sailing from Southampton, England to New York City in September 1911, and it got damaged. So according to the unlikely conspiracy, see how they word this? Since the damage to Olympic was extensive and very expensive to repair, the owner of both ships, the White Star Line, which we know was owned by J.P. Morgan, I think it was, swapped the two vessels. So the Olympic masqueraded as Titanic during its maiden voyage in 1912. Why would they do that? Well, because the boat was damaged and they thought they could get insurance on it and the insurance would pay for it. At the same time, you can't let a good disaster go to waste, and they're about ready to bring in the Federal Reserve, and they had to get rid of Astora and Strauss and Guggenheimer or whatever his name was. So they put him on the boat and sunk it and got the money for the insurance. So they swapped the two vessels. The conspiracy theorists suggest that the ship's crew were supposed to sink the damaged Olympic during the voyage so that the White Star Line would be able to collect the insurance money. Nobody was supposed to die. Well, I think they were supposed to die as a result of the sinking. It was supposedly to sink slowly enough that everyone could evacuate in time. I don't believe that either. I mean, It's just odd that we're even reading about this conspiracy. I always find little bits or clues in the story to tell you whether it's true or not. And I guarantee this story isn't just a story that they accidentally slipped out, it got leaked like a wiki leak. They tell you this story, just like stories they tell you about Tesla or stories they tell you about this or that. And all these stories are just to give you a false understanding about something in the past. They don't want you to know that they came in and did a shenanigans with the Federal Reserve and that there were those who were opposed to it. They don't want you to know anything about these guys that were opposed to it. They had to get rid of them. And so they didn't want you to go back and wonder why it sunk, so they make up stories, and then somebody comes along with the truth and they say it's a conspiracy theory. But if you look at the story, it's like controlled opposition. It's the good side, like sending Tucker Carlson out telling you all the truth because they're ready to disclose the truth now and blame all the bad things on one of the actors that they don't need anymore. And they'll pretend that they executed them and we'll all rejoice. And then they'll get us to willingly accept the one world order, the law and order, because we're tired of the chaos. So this is what they're doing here. They put this story, they run it out there. They tell everybody, oh, it's a hoax, and people start believing it. And in the story itself, they're basically telling you they took over the world. Yeah, they're the devil. They got rid of Jesus and all the good guys, and they win. But you see, they don't realize that they didn't win. But what did they do? Well, here's what's interesting. They may have thought that maybe Jesus was coming back in 1914 or something. One of their guys that mysteriously died, and then they made a deity out of him, put a big pyramid in the Philadelphia Masonic graveyard or cemetery. And this is where all the most powerful people are buried, in the Masonic cemetery in Philadelphia. It's the grand cemetery for all these very powerful Masons, Freemasons. And in the center of that, up on the hill above all the rest, in a great pyramid, is Charles Taze Russell, who started Jehovah's Witnesses. They gave him the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, a little like the Anne Besant who made the Theosophical Society. These societies run the world. They're under the umbrella of a couple of other organizations. But one of their main organizations is Jehovah's Witnesses. Another one is the Satanic Church and the Mormons. And, of course, the Roman Catholic Church has been, she's the mother of the harlots, right? They've been using these tools. And then they infiltrated the Knights, Templars, and so forth. And they created their own groups like the Bohemian Grove and the Bilderbergers and so forth. Trilateral Commission, and all these things have a function. But these powerful individuals run it. But it's all really been run since 1914. That's when they started the League of Nations right after World War II, or World War I. After World War II, they did the United Nations. They seem to be very much in charge, or shall we say the NHS or the CIA. There's all these organizations. And they're using them all. They're all Confederate. The news media and everything. And so, Charles Taze Russell published a magazine called The Watchtower, and it said, announcing Jehovah's kingdom. Now, Albert Pike said they worship Jehovah, and in other places they called him Lucifer. Well, I don't think they understood what the name Lucifer means. It means the light bearer, and it's a word they use to translate this particular word in Hebrew in Isaiah 14. Since they didn't understand that their deity, Yahweh, was the devil, it was the devil, Yahweh, that was angry at someone who claimed to be like the Most High, which was Jesus, who they condemned for blasphemy, claiming to be like the divine being, one with the divine being. And Yahweh sent him to hell, which he did, and he spent 3 days and 3 nights in hell. So Jesus claims to be the light bearer or the morning star in Revelation chapter 2, verse 28 in there, and also in chapter 22, like around verse 15 or 17 or somewhere in there. So I don't know exactly what they are referring to when they say Lucifer, but they're very happy to tell you they worship Lucifer. If they really knew what they were talking about, there might be some leniency for them, but they literally know what they're talking about. They've also started groups like, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses got that name spread all over the world, but the Masons declare that they worship Jehovah. In Albert Pike's Dogmas and Morals, or Morals and Dogma, or whatever he wrote, it specifically states that they worship Jehovah. He is the true deity that they worship. So, my point is that there are other groups of individuals that believe that we're in the last days or the end of this age. I mean, the New Age believes we're going to go into the age of Aquarius, So, this is not just something only Jehovah's Witnesses believe. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that 1914 was the end of the old system and the New Age began. Christ was in heaven, and it was his parousia. He arrived. It's his coming. And it's all going to end in a great battle and Armageddon. Now, they originally got that idea from the Great Pyramid. They measured the hallway passageway that goes diagonally up towards the king's chamber. There was another passageway that veered off of that, went to the queen's chamber, and they would measure it, and every inch was supposed to represent a year or something of this nature, and it's supposed to have predicted all the main events in history, and it all ends at the King's Chamber in 1914. This is why Charles Taze Russell said that the Great Pyramid was a Bible written in stone, and so he was buried in a pyramid, but he had the Freemason symbolism all over his books. He was definitely a Freemason. I was just talking to somebody, a dear friend, today about the fact that when they literally killed George Washington. He got sick supposedly, but somebody said they actually killed him. Well, then they deified him. And they did the same thing with Lincoln. They killed him, and then they deified him. So Washington, they made the Washington Monument, the obelisk, which is what they always did with the pharaohs that were very important or powerful men of history, right? That started a major new civilization. So Washington's got the obelisk there in front of the great baptismal font there in Washington, in front of the Capitol, which is the capital of the world, with the little dome, and it's the female Ben, and the phallus symbol is the obelisk. And they did this in Egypt, Rome, same thing at Vatican, London. They do this all over. Buenos Aires and Chicago. Well, Washington, then, they didn't go and haul one of the Egyptian obelisks up here and put it there in Washington. They literally made a new one out of marble or stone. They carved it and dedicated it to Washington, and that was literally a monument to the man who is now deified. Now, Abraham Lincoln, you see him inside of a Greek Athenian style temple. People go make pilgrimages every year to go see President Lincoln, right? He was deified as well. So we've got these two divine beings, kind of like pharaohs, in succession. Well, anyone who's very, very powerful, now look, I'm not certain yet that some of these individuals even part of the program, like they killed Kennedy, and now he's deified in American nostalgia, right? Well, was he one of theirs, or was there a feud going on? Do they just kill their enemies and deify them? I mean, that doesn't make sense. But a lot of these individuals that are murdered end up in obelisks or pyramids somewhere. But the ones that were killed ritualistically in an altar, by an altar or in a graveyard. Those are the most powerful ones. Charles Taze Russell was murdered or sacrificed on Halloween night, October the 31st, in Pampa, Texas, in a graveyard, doing some kind of a ritual or something, they say. We don't know whether he was doing it or they were doing it to him. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that somebody would be privy to their own ritualistic death. But I do know that the whole thing was handed over to Judge Rutherford, who, like a judge or lawyer or whatever, seems to be one of the Bavarian elite, took it over on the very day that Charles Taze Russell died in the graveyard on Halloween night. Judge Rutherford was in Los Angeles taking over some Germans. This was the first Project Paperclip. After World War II, they did it again, but they had been doing this for a while. These Germans that were bringing over, Charles Taze Russell either did it himself or had the idea or he was told to do it, but Judge Rutherford headed that up. He was in Los Angeles, and he sort of took over, and they created Hollywood. And I have shown documentation that Jehovah's Witnesses created Hollywood. Scientology is another organization that is heavy into the Hollywood area. And so they got Tom Cruise and stuff like this. Now, I just saw a tweet from Derek Bros, we've been talking about, who he said in some video a few weeks back that his dad and his grandpa were high up Masons. He also said that he was, well, how we'll put it, from that little country south of Lebanon, that was his lineage. He admitted that. And the other day, I guess a few days ago, he made a video saying that his father had a feud with L. Ron Hubbard, who started Scientology, and was, I guess, a Scientologist, or something of that nature. They were both in that same Aleister Crowley cult, the same cult that Anton LaVey was in, and went off and started Scientology and the Church of Satan and these groups, and NASA, and different persons started NASA, Werner von Braun. All these individuals that came over, they were all involved in this sister cult to the Thule Society, and they called it the Templi Ordae Eastern that Aleister Crowley made there. Now, it's interesting that was in Pasadena, which is the exact spot where that temple. And it's also where Herbert W. Armstrong, who also went back to the law, like Jehovah's Witnesses, back to Jehovah, back to the old hard-nosed old law, and not, kind of denying the deity of Christ, that kind of thing. These were organizations, these modern organizations that got started, and Herbert Armstrong created a college or some sort of school, like the School of the Prophets, Bethel, or whatever they call it, And he started in Pasadena. So I don't have proof that Herbert Armstrong was a member of that cult, but there's a strong possibility. Most all of these organizations are. Now, my only point by all of that was that if Charles Taze Russell, a Mason, proclaimed far and wide with the New World Order Bible and the Watchtower announcing Jehovah's kingdom, and then boom, 1914, World War I, and the Judean people go back to Palestine with the Balfour Declaration, and then 1947 and 1948 it became a nation. It was all on cue. Was it coinkadinkle? Did Russell know something? Announcing Jehovah's kingdom? He taught that the only hope for mankind was the restoration of the state of Israel. And, of course, he died in 16 or 17, I think. Another person that died in that same, 1916, was Ellen White. Now, she's the one who was the prophet for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Well, she died, and in her graveyard, there's an obelisk. Now, it's not a large obelisk like Washington's, but it is an obelisk in the graveyard. And so it appears that she was commandeered after her death as well. Now, I think they might have been using her There's certain individuals they were using for the same kind of purpose. Madame Blavatsky, I don't believe they used her, but she started the whole thing by writing these books, The Secret Doctrine and The Unveiling of Isis and so forth. It was just explosive knowledge, and they didn't like it, and they tried to murder her. They put a hit on her, and then they usurped her whole teaching and supplanted it with this New Age gobbledygook and Anne Besant and these other individuals. But in the New Age movement, they also believe in Jehovah, and they had these beliefs like Aldebaran, that the divine being lived on the Pleiades and so forth. So Jehovah's Witnesses believed in this too. They believed that Jehovah lived on Alcyon in the Pleiades. They're all very similar in their beliefs and teachings, and they all come from the same ideas, and they believe in the pyramids and all of this, and they all worship Jehovah, and they all evidently thought that the world was coming to an end by 1914. I remember the Adventists said it would be 1844, and that would be the last generation, and so yeah, about 1914, they thought it would all end, and Christ would return, and Jehovah's Witnesses declared the presence of Christ and announcing Jehovah's kingdom. So it makes you wonder if maybe they were actually thinking that they were taking the world. They had outsmarted Jesus, overthrown him, sunk him in the sea, in the Titans in the sea, and the Olympians were the ones who were supposed to have done that, but they switched it. It's symbolism. I do believe they understand symbolism. Very, very important to them. So they write these novels, and we don't know what they mean. These little stories. They say that Trump's going to be the last president in one book. They say that Elon's going to lead a colony to Mars in another book. L. Ron Hubbard wrote all these weird novels. I wish I had the time to read them to find out what kind of secrets they may hold, because you've got to read them between the lines. Some people are reading them as novels. I don't believe they were written as novels. Very soon now, I'm going to get a hold of some of those books and see what's going on in the L. Ron Hubbard's novels. But they're leaking what they're doing. So what was this Federal Reserve? Now, here's something that you might find very interesting. DuPont and these, J.P. Morgan and the Rockefeller guy and all these other guys, they went to a little island called Jekyll Island. And I think, like, what? Jekyll? Is that what, Jekyll and Hyde? Is that, I don't even know what that means, but it brings up some kind of evil hunchback or some weird satanic thought in my mind. I'm like, what kind of an island is that, right? To meet all these powerful people. I guess in the day that was the original Bohemian Grove. Now they've switched it, and they all meet in California in the redwoods with the Bohemian Grove. But at some point way back then, right after World War II, they began meeting at Jekyll Island. This is off of the coast of Georgia. And where they were meeting, they knew perfectly well there was a sacred site where there was a native Indian homeland that not too many years before that, they had completely murdered and wiped off the face of the earth. They claimed they all died of some diseases because they were not, they had never been exposed to the European diseases, and that's why they all got, disappeared. But I don't believe that's true. I don't even know that I believe in the VI, thing. I think a lot of that is a story. I think what it is the Grim Reaper that you hear in the storybooks all the time. In Europe, some guy with a black robe, probably a priest, would come with this thing. They look like a sigh, and they called him the Grim Reaper. Well, it was probably a spray nozzle, and they would spray all over the city, and they'd wake up the next day and everybody would be dead. They called that the Black Plague and this and that and the other kind of plague. So I personally think, I know they've done this beyond any shadow of a doubt. It's not conjecture. They went to Canada. They gave all the Native Americans these blankets for free. Well, they had infected the blankets with these diseases, and they all died. So, yeah, they do this. The story goes that these natives that were there were tall, 8-9 feet tall. They think maybe even taller, because the bones have been there for a long time, and they're 9 feet now, and they've shrunk a little bit. So And they don't know if that was the average size but it seems like all these individuals were giants. And the stories of that time were that they were giants when they got to America. And if you look at some of these pictures, you see these people, they don't look like they were Native American people. They look more European. Now, they claim that, they were a Native Indian tribe. They painted pictures of them and they look white. But these individuals didn't act anything like other natives. They sacrificed children, babies on an altar, like the Canaanite cannibals, the Cain Abal, like Baal, the worship of Baal. And it was very, very common knowledge. When the French came there, they were scared of them. They ran at first. Then they ended up trying to make a treaty with them, and they ended up making a treaty instead with another tribe. And they claimed that these individuals, when they got there, were beheading or scalping people, and they were brutal. They were sacrificing to some deity like Molok. Well, I don't know if I believe any of that. They claim this happened like 500 years ago, like 1500s is when they were there. They seem to be Europeans that settled on the coast of Georgia. They don't seem to be the regular native peoples. The other native Indians didn't like them, and they were trying to kill them. They had nothing in common with regular Native Americans. They were cannibals. I have evidence, friends, that they may not have been natives at all. Because when Rockefeller chose that location, he didn't choose it because of the beach. He chose that location specifically because there was an altar to Satan there, where they would sacrifice babies. And on that altar, Mr. John D. Rockefeller built his house. And all the other rich individuals came out there that would spend some period of time. They all built an edifice, a cottage or something, on a precise location where either an altar had been once there or it was a particular holy site or something that was connected with these natives. Now, why did John D. Rockefeller go to this particular location, reverence this altar to Satan, build his cottage or abode? It's not a cottage, it's a pretty good size, like Victorian home there. He's got the biggest one of the lot. And they had this meeting house, and they would all come together, all the most powerful people, just like they do in the Bohemian Grove in California. And they would come and they would decide what they were going to do, and they created the Federal Reserve there. So the Federal Reserve was created on Jekyll Island as they sat over an altar to Baal or Molech, because Baal just means husband. I think it's another way that they would use to speak of Molech, which meant the king. And it was this evil king, we've talked about this, that they sacrificed babies to. So the Wall Street today has a symbol of that golden calf, which is Molech. The entire financial system is based on sacrificing your children to Molech. It's based on cannibalism. It's based on a group of individuals that came to the world who want to feel superior, that call themselves the master race, that are using all of us peasants as slaves, and they are rearing up this evil, diabolical system called the beast, which is the beast of astrology, the carnal natures that rule over us today in this carnal world. And that beast of astrology, that Sphinx, sometimes has the face of a lion or a man and the tail of a lion. It looks like a lion more. Sometimes it looks like it's got more of an eagle look to it. Sometimes it's more of a bull. In the Hebrew Bible, they called the cherubim, many times they called it a bull. Well, the horns of the altar and all that. But it was just the bull Taurus with other features. It had wings, the wings of the eagle. It has the lion parts of it. So it was the four astrological signs that make up the symbol, the gargoyle, the sphinx, the cherub, that represents the deities of this world. And it's literally the worship of the beast. That is what the Federal Reserve System is, the whole financial system. The golden calf is right there. You see it at Wall Street. And it's not feasible to me to think that John D. Rockefeller and DuPont and J.P. Morgan and all the rest didn't know that Astor, the richest man in the world, just before, because he opposed the Federal Reserve, they didn't know that this accident, this Titan, the Titans were going to sink in the abyss. They didn't know that the Olympians would win, but it would be reversed, and actually the Titans would win and the Olympians would be destroyed. They didn't know that the unsinkable ship was already damaged. They didn't know that they had already taken out an insurance claim on the Titanic. This is one of the reasons why they say that this conspiracy theory that the ships were switched has to be false, because there's identifying marks that would tell you which ship it was, and there are pictures showing that it had to be the Titanic. Well, they had to change those identifying marks, and they faked it because they were trying to get the insurance money. And they were also trying to do this little symbolism that only the elite know about. They're up there in their little, castle on Fifth Avenue, laughing it up, sitting on their gold-plated toilet seat. I think they know exactly what they're doing. And I believe that they probably would not have founded the Federal Reserve on an obscure Native American tribe that may or may not have scalped people. I don't believe that the natives scalped people. I think those individuals were cannibals, the supposed natives that were there. I think they came over with the Huguenots and the French and the New Scotland or the Nova Scotia or the New Franca and the New Spain, and they were all coming over and colonizing. And the French were trying to colonize that area. Today, the only trace of those individuals is that they went to Cuba. They drove them out, and they may have ended up going to Cuba. Well, Cuba is communist. It's like they never were a part of the United States. And today you see a lot of these individuals from Cuba running countries, such as that joker that's running Canada today, whose father was Fidel Castro. I don't know, but I think they went to Cuba and took over that and are working for the communists there as a way to tear down and destroy the Constitution of the United States. Anywho, one way that they tried to take down the Constitution was to literally infiltrate everything that they could find. And they infiltrated the United States. We had a Constitution in 1776, and they started their Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. So I don't think that's a coincidence. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they dedicated this Federal Reserve to a deity that required the death of your child, to Molok. And so there's a lot that I'm going to look into. Eventually, I'm going to find or get to the bottom of exactly who these individuals were. I just don't think they were normal Native American peoples. Now, I've also heard a particular shaman, native chief that tells the true stories about the ancient ones, the Anasazi and certain individuals like the Pueblo Indians and the Zuni and the Hopi and these individuals, as to who they all were and who the Anasazi was. And he says they had nothing to do with the Anasazi. They were an evil group. They were like tall, giant peoples or something. They weren't really, he didn't believe they were like 20 feet tall or anything, but he said they might have been tall people. But they were evil. They sacrificed children and they enslaved the native peoples. The native peoples didn't do any of this stuff. The ones that did this stuff were these tall European peoples. They had different ways. The Indian chief said they call them the different ones. Their government was different. Their way was different. And they were being nice. They could have said they were the evil ones, but they didn't. They say they were different than us. And he says, I want to correct the story. These cannibals, they find up there at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, they find all these little bones, little baby bones. They would sacrifice children there. And they're saying these are the natives and that there were bad native peoples, but these were no part of the native peoples. And I don't believe that these other Timucua Indians, I don't believe they were Indians. The pictures that they have of them are tall white individuals with the Roman nose. You do see certain native peoples with that, like Chief Joseph, and like on the nickel, he's got that nose. Well, friends, that is not a Native American nose. That is a white man's nose. And Chief Joseph was not a Native American. Those were the ones that were doing the scalping, not the natives. And those came, back with Columbus and that kind of thing, and Amerigo Vespucci and whatever. They were the ones that were warring with the other natives before Americans got here, even before the Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower. These were Vikings. These were German Roman nose individuals. You heard the Roman nose. Well, why are these Native Americans pictured on the nickel with a Roman nose? And why are you calling him German? Because Germany took over Italy. The Lombards, a German tribe, took over Italy. And the Goths took over most of Rome, the Roman Empire. So the Goths, the Lombards, the Heruli, the 10 Germanic tribes took that area over in 405 CE, Christ's era, in our era. So those individuals then that today are running Hollywood and running most everything you can imagine, the modern aristocrats that ingratiate themselves to you on television and popularize themselves through having television programs like You're Fired and, spend years making a name for themselves, making themselves popular, then running for president. They're fooling you. And they got a plan. And you can see the plan as they weave it. It's important to read their stories. Try to find out what they're up to, because I'm just like that. I'm a curious individual. I want to know what they're doing, what they're up to. It may actually be important for our survival. I believe it absolutely will. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, friends. I hope you have a wonderful evening. May the Lord bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.